Buddhism originated within India by the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama. However, when we think of Buddhism, we don't usually think of India. We think of other Asian countries, Thailand, China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam even. We don't think as much of India. So how did Buddhism get from India to the other parts of Asia? We trace the spread of Buddhism back to Ashoka, an Indian king about 250 BC. He converted to Buddhism, and he actually then sought to spread the teachings of the Buddha. He did this through erecting many columns inscribed with teachings attributed to the Buddha. And there's a picture of one of these columns, which we still have in existence today, of archaeological evidence to back this up. He also sent out missionaries to spread the Buddhist teachings, so we can attribute a lot of Buddhism spread to King Ashoka. Quoting from Michael Malloy's Experiencing the World's Religions, 5th edition, he wrote, in the first centuries after the Buddha's death, in response to widespread and long-lasting disagreements over the Buddha's teachings, many Buddhist schools and splinter groups arose. So since the Buddha's teachings were spread orally for 2 or 3 centuries, and they weren't written down until later, a lot of differences ended up arising. And it's nothing new. I mean, we see this within Christianity. Most of the letters that Paul and the other apostles wrote were pertaining to countering false teachings that were already arising in the first century from other groups that were claiming to be Christians or followers of Christ. Some people even claiming to be Christ is what we seem to see within the letters to the Thessalonians in 1 Thessalonians and 2 Thessalonians. Of these schools that emerged, 3 of them survived and crystallized into the great branches of Buddhism that we recognize today, which would be Theravada Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, and Vajrayana. And of course there are divisions even within these branches, and people who follow a specific Buddhist path are often not aware of other branches. It's pretty interesting. So if you ask a Buddhist if they happen to be a Theravada Buddhist, they probably won't even know. Instead, they will associate themselves with a lineage of teachers or traditions. First branch I'll look at is Theravada Buddhism. This is a very conservative group. By conservative, when we talk religions being conservative, it means that they focus on the sacred texts, which are accepted and authoritative. So in this case, they focus on the teachings of the Buddha. For them, the teachings of the Buddha are found within... My light just went off. The teachings of the Buddha are associated in the canon, which is referred to as the Tripitaka, which means the 3 baskets, which is divided into 3 different sections of text. And so, conservative group religiously focus on authoritative sacred texts. And each branch has their own text, but they strive to emulate and follow what the Buddha taught exactly, and to try to practice Buddhism as Siddhartha did. Theravada itself means way of the elders, which means they are centered on the community of monks. And Theravada Buddhism stresses that nirvana is obtained through detachment and desirelessness, through meditation, which is exactly what the Buddha taught. So they really center on the 4 noble truths, and following the Eightfold Path is the way to enlightenment. They would actually go so far as to say that only monks can achieve nirvana. Another aspect of Theravada is they have arhats. These are people that they consider to have reached nirvana. And so an arhat would be anyone that's reached nirvana, and then oftentimes statues will be made of this person, and veneration will actually be given to these statues, which I'll talk about in a moment. But Theravada Buddhism, generally recognized by orange robes, maybe brown, and this is a carryover from Hinduism. The ascetics within India, within Hinduism, generally wore orange robes. So we can trace back to that. The monks beg for their food within Theravada Buddhism, which means that the monks live close to lay people, and temples are actually found within cities. Because obviously if you're having to survive off the means of others and their provision, you're going to have to be near people. You're not going to find Theravada monks up on high mountain tops. The temples as well serve as community service centers. So people give a lot to the temples, and in return they pump out a lot of good to the community, sometimes providing medicine or food and clothing, which is really good. The perk for people then to give to these monks is that by their donations they get good karma in return. So it's mutually benefiting to all that they're actually begging, and that through their begging they're giving people an opportunity to gain good karma. Considering these Arhat statues of old and wizened monks play a prevalent role, and in some cases these statues are considered to be wonder workers, and so people will take these statues and put them in their homes up on a nice shelf, and with these statues will receive signs of veneration through flowers or water, fruit and incense. It's a sign of offering to this person who's still considered somehow to be existent out in nirvana. This is very similar to a guru in Hinduism. So people would go to a guru if in Hinduism the idea is that this guru has drawn very close to Brahman, and that closeness of Brahman is then emanated through that person out, and so as you come into the light essentially that this person is putting off of Brahman, you yourself grow closer to Brahman through it. So it's very similar to that concept. This person's reached enlightenment, except now they are in nirvana. They've reached nirvana, they're no longer reborn. And so now we extend that sort of practice that the Hindus had towards the guru, except to a non-living object of representation. And so as a person goes to these objects, they are reminded of what this person has done and somehow receive blessing from it. The image I have here doesn't represent Theravada Buddhism. It represents Mahayana Buddhism, which we'll get into because that's the next branch that I'll cover. You can tell this though because the fat laughing Buddha is associated with Mahayana, as well as the lady in the back holding the vase of water. Her name's Guanyin. She's also associated with Mahayana. But this image gives a good depiction though of how they'll burn candles or offer fruit to these statues of these old and wizened monks. Because the vast majority of Buddhists have been unable to read, they have learned their religious beliefs and practices not from books, but from hearing sermons, seeing temple paintings, and listening to older family members. The pictures I have here are of Hangzhou, China. At least the one on the left is. It's Leifang Tower. Leifang Tower is very central to the story of the White Snake Lady. It's a fable that is known all over China. I would almost bet to say every person living in mainland China knows this story. Just to show an example of how the teachings are spread through family members, I talked to a lady who I worked with who I asked her about this White Snake Lady story. She grew up in Hangzhou. Her family hails from there. And I asked her if she thinks the story is true, and she told me yes. And she said it's because her grandmother told her the story and she doesn't believe old people would lie. Very interesting. But that was her honest response. And if you want to know more about that story, I'd suggest you look it up. It's a pretty interesting story. In addition to the so-called canonical scriptures, folk tales have also been influential. Here's an example. Also within Hangzhou, there is the Tiger Spring. And there's a folk tale that builds up around it that this one monk had a dream, and in his dream he saw two tigers digging a hole, and out this hole they dug, this spring sprung forth. And so when he went to where he saw this dream, the location of this dream, there was a spring that just emerged there, which wasn't there the day before. And so they now have erected this statue monument that you see in the picture on the left, and it's very clean water. I mean, this is in the center of a city in China of 7 million people, a country where no one drinks from the tap, but people go to this spring and get water from it and drink it directly. A lot of people will actually go here to get all the water for their family. There are some folk tales that the waters have healing properties. Here's a quote I got from the temple, which was at this spring. And it was a quote, there's a picture on the right there of the temple. But here's a quote about this monk that had this dream. It says, "However, unlike traditional Buddhist monks, he ate meat and drank wine. He rolled about the hillside with monkeys, sang songs of children in the Hangzhou wine shops, and dressed as a beggar, wearing worn clothes, hat, shoes, and always holding a fan, as well as a gourd containing wine." And so, if this is one of the traditions of their Buddhist monks in Hangzhou, what do you expect the Buddhists in Hangzhou to be like? You guessed it, Hangzhou is known as the leisure capital of China. Everyone from there has this sort of image, or the rest of China has this image of the people of Hangzhou as being very laid back, carefree, and drinking wine and eating all day. And so, I don't know, maybe it's connected to this influence of this one monk, but definitely this spring, this water, definitely known all over China as well. So that's a take on Theravada Buddhism. Again, this is a conservative branch, and you can recognize them largely through their orange robes, and only the monks can achieve nirvana, and it's stressed through following the Eightfold Path, detaching yourself from desires, and meditation.